Hey, Walter, how are you?
Oh, pretty good. And yourself?
Good. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Perfectly. Hey, thanks for taking such a late time. I'm in Honolulu right now in our Hawaii office, so it's as early as I could do it, unfortunately.
No problem. No problem.
Let me get right to what I think is the issue that's driving me crazy. And I'll tell you at the outset, I think this is kind of a small point, but I think you and I disagree on this. But I'm having a discussion with another fellow named Matt Sands. And Matt has a project called the Nations of Sanity. Are you familiar with his project?
No.
Okay. Let me try to summarize what the nature of the dispute is. Matt's a good guy and he's got a great project. He's over in the UK. The issue is in the areas that are difficult to apply the principle, things that you call continuum problems. He calls gray areas. I call hard problems. These the really hard cases. What's a substantial risk? Those kinds of questions. What I say, I'll start with what I say. What I say in such a situation is these are very hard questions, and reasonable minds can disagree on the answer to these questions. I think you like to stop there. You say, well, it's a continuum problem and reasonable minds can disagree. Or maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But what I say should be done is let's take in these areas, let's take the solution and bring it down to the lowest level possible, the local community. And let's let the local community employ whatever mechanism they think is best. And they can apply as long as it's within a realm of reasonableness. And what I mean by this is take the age of consent, for example. If they choose 18 or maybe they choose 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, anything they choose in that area, that's the rule in that community. And they get to enforce it just like we enforce any other violation. So if they choose 15, then that's the rule in the community. And so if somebody has sex with a 14-year-old, then they're violating the principle. If somebody has sex with a 15-year-old, they're not. And that's the way I think it should go. And the reason I think it should go that way is because it's easy. The transaction cost to move from one community to the next is very low. And this is how we'll get the best rule overall. And so that's the resolution that I propose and that we talk about with Live and Let Live project. Matt Sands with his Nations of Sanity project, and I want to try to give him I want to steel man his argument as much as I can here. Matt says, look, these gray areas, these are very difficult questions. And so in those areas, we can't say beyond a reasonable doubt exactly what is a violation of the principle. And since we can't say beyond a reasonable doubt what it is, we can make no rule in this area whatsoever. And therefore, if something falls within a gray area, whatever issue is in a gray area, we can have no law, no rule, nothing can be enforced in that area. And people can only, they're left to work this out however they work this out. That's his position. What I thought was your position, I might be wrong here, was that you say there is an answer somehow, and that answer should be imposed on everybody, everywhere, no matter what, I think is what your answer is.
Yeah. My answer is that the courts should decide, private courts should decide. Now, it's possible that the courts will decide exactly what you say. Namely, anywhere from 15 to 19 is okay, but 10 and 5 is ridiculous, and 26 is ridiculous. That's one way they could decide. Another way they could decide is it's got to be 17.
Yeah.
But it should be up to the courts. We anarchists, we three Lers, believe in courts and law. We're law-abiding people. Now the courts should be private courts, of course. They shouldn't be government courts, but that's another issue, a separate issue. So let's forget about that. But I think that the court should decide, and the courts might decide your way. I doubt that the courts would decide Matt's way, because that's not anarchy, that's chaos.
Yes, that's what I keep telling him. What I'm saying to Matt is, look, everybody's going to argue everything's gray, right? There will be definitely people in the world who will say no matter what you select, it's gray and it can't be enforced. And Matt to that says, no. What he says is this to me. He says, Mark, everybody agrees that 21 and older for a female, that's definitely a consenting adult. And everybody agrees that 12 and under, that is not a consenting adult. And so that area in between, that's all gray, and we can make no rule in this area.
Well, if I had to pick between you and him, I would pick you.
Okay,
But
fair enough.
If I had to pick between me and you, I'd pick me. But mine includes yours as a possibility. Namely, it doesn't necessarily mean that the courts would say 17.
Yeah.
It might be the courts will say, look, anywhere between 15 and 19, and each local community decides for itself. Namely, that's exactly your view. The courts could decide that, but they could also decide 17.
I have no issue with that either. I don't know that you and I disagree. I think that.
Well, no, we do disagree, because you're saying each community should decide for itself, and I say it's up to the courts. Now, the courts might decide your way, but the courts might decide against you.
Well, when you say courts, there are different levels of courts, right? There are city courts, there are higher level, take regional type courts, right? There's a court in a little city, in a little community, because they may have lots of different rules that apply in their community that are, look, there are things that people are concerned about in Maine that they're not concerned about in Arizona, for example. There are different rules that apply. Maine doesn't have problems with 115-degree summers, and Arizona doesn't have problems with 20-degree winters, or even colder than that. So because of the differences, they're going to have different rules. They
might have different rules, but they might not. Now, the way Murray says this is, you don't have a legislature. You don't have a legislature deciding things. What you have is two people suing each other. I sue you because you went to bed with a 16-year-old girl, and I think 17 is right. And now you go to your court, and I go to my court, and the courts both decide in your favor or in my favor, or if they disagree, then they go to a Supreme Court, namely, remember, there are bandit courts and legitimate courts, and the bandit courts don't agree with anyone, but the legitimate courts anticipate this, and they say, let's go pick Ron Paul. If we ever have a dispute, he'll be our Supreme Court. And that's the way that gets decided. So it's not that we pass a law. You don't pass a law in Mississippi or Maine or Arizona. What you do is I sue you over something, or I'm now going to punch you. And you sue me for punching you. I say, that's ridiculous. I'm in New Orleans, you're in Hawaii. We're friends. This is silly. And that's the way the law gets set up based on what the court says.
Now, that's what we lawyers call common law, which is fine. This is what the courts decide. However, right. I'm charting this out now, right? So let's just say that process has occurred. And let's say you and I, we live in New Orleans, and this has been resolved in New Orleans. And it went all the way up to whatever the highest level was. And they came down and they said, that's the rule. The rule is 17. Is there anything wrong with us publishing that and say, hey, just want to let everybody know that the courts have decided in this case that 17 is the rule here. Now, yep. You might not want to call that a statute. You don't have to call it a statute. You can call it notice, reasonable notice to everybody. I never care what you call it, but can't we publish that and say the rule now in this area is 17?
Absolutely. Why not?
I think it's perfectly fine. And now there's the same dispute in Maine. And they send that up to however they resolve it. And they've decided that 16 is the rule there. And so they publish that rule that 16 is there and 16 is to be enforced there and 17 is to be enforced in New Orleans. And then I see nothing wrong with that's exactly what I'm proposing.
Unless a person from Maine sues a person from New Orleans or vice versa.
Then we need to have a different result. And what I think needs to have, frankly, what I like the concept of federalism. I think it makes a lot of sense. And so what that court, if I was on that court resolving the dispute between the two places, my job is not to put my personal opinion about what I think it should be. My job is to say, are these both reasonable constructions? If they're both reasonable constructions, then they're both fine. If they're unreasonable constructions, then we say sorry.
That is a possible decision of the court. But the way you see it, that's a necessary decision of the court. The way I see it, it's not a necessary decision of the court. The court could say it's 17 and 6 months. In both places, in both places, whereas you want to see this decentralism, this federalism stuff, which I see as just a possibility. Whereas you see it as
I think a general rule is fine as well. In fact, it makes life easy. It doesn't bother me a bit.
Right. Well, then we have no dispute.
If you want to know what Mark Victor thinks, what I would advocate for, I think it makes sense to have, and I presented this to Stefan Kinsella the other day, and he loved it too. And I think the idea is there should be a presumption that, say, for example, 18 and above, the presumption is you're competent, and a presumption that's just, say, 14 and below is not competent. It could be rebutted with evidence. And things in the middle, we don't know. Maybe you have to have a hearing and we got to look at each case individually. That would be fine too.
Good. But I think maybe we're having a rapprochement. If you'll agree that it doesn't have to be that each local community decides for itself, that's one possibility. But before we got into this, that was your view, that each community has to decide for itself. And I say no. That's only one possibility. Whatever the courts decide. Now, if the courts decide in Maine, since it's 20 degrees, we do this, and in Arizona, since it's 100 degrees, we do that, fine. And that's your view. But if they decide that Maine and Arizona have to have the same rule, that's also fine, which is different than what you want.
Not really. This is exactly what we have now. In fact, what we have now, and I think our court system, look, the substantive laws are wrong now. But if we take, for example, the criminal justice system, if we got rid of the victimless crimes, I don't really have much of a beef with anything else. I mean, a few things I would change on the edges. Being a criminal defense lawyer, I like some other things differently, but that's just nitpicking on the edges. There are some rules that are national now, like things like due process. There are federal requirements beyond a reasonable doubt. For example, if Maine decided, we're going to use a preponderance standard to decide criminal cases, the courts in our country would say, sorry, that's a national rule. It applies to everybody. Everybody gets unanimous juries and beyond a reasonable doubt, and the right to cross-examine and confront witnesses. These are all things, sorry, whether you like it or not, you're stuck with it. But on the other hand, there are other rules like what exactly constitutes disorderly conduct. Some places have rules on, I don't know, littering or other things, or what's a noise ordinance, for example, is a local community type of a thing. How much noise, what time is too late. These are the kinds of things that local communities decide. So I agree with you. I think that I don't have any problem if they said, hey, noise ordinances nationally must always be 10 o'clock and past that, it violates the rule. Okay, I don't have any big beef with that. But we recognize that some people, maybe they party more in LA and the noise ordinances go later there than they do in Kansas or something. I don't know. But so I think we're in agreement here. But the big issue that I wanted to get across here, because Matt and I have been going back and forth. He thinks that it is a horrendous violation of our principle to take a hard question, which he calls a gray area, and make any rule and then subject everybody in that community, because some people will disagree. And to that I say, sorry, some people disagree with the principle too. The thief disagrees that he shouldn't be able to steal. He disagrees with the rule. He disagrees with our notion of property rights. To him, we say, sorry, too bad. We don't care that you disagree.
I agree with you. Matt, I think, is wrong. Now, I don't know of him, but from what you say, he's a good guy, but he has one problem. It's sort of like the way Murray had a problem with George, the Georgists.
I'm not familiar with that one.
Oh, what's his name? They were laissez-faire capitalists except for land. You can't own land. And Murray Rothbard had this aphorism or the statement. He said, people specialize in what they're horrible at. And he picked Milton Friedman. He said, Milton Friedman is really good on free trade, on minimum wage, on victimless crimes. And he's really good on a lot of things. What does he stick to? Monetarism and education that we have to have, and what do you call it? The negative income tax. Those are his big things. And Henry George, I think it's Henry George, was very, very good on everything except land, and all he talked about was land. Well, I hope this guy, Matt
Sands.
I hope he's very good on everything, and he doesn't just specialize in the one thing that he's bad on.
No. And to everything else, I think we agree on. He's a very good guy. And in fact, I'll say to his credit, he's been very, very open-minded, as am I, to changing his mind. This is why one of the reasons I like talking to you so much is because I want to make sure I get it right. I think we agree on almost everything. There's probably a few things we don't agree on, but nonetheless, you disagree with Murray on some things. Nobody agrees on everything 100%, but I want to make sure that when I put my book out, I'm putting out the best product I can put out, because frankly, Live and Let Live is growing really nicely. We have chapters all over the world now. There's so much going on. I can't even keep track of who's involved in the thing. So I'm very, very excited. It's really, I think that I was talking to Stefan the other day, and I think we both are in agreement that, chopping off some things that we don't really need to argue about, which are important still, right? The foundations of how we get to the principle. This is important, but not so much important if we're going to try to get the world moving in a certain direction. If you come to the principle and you love the principle because you believe your God told you follow the principle, why quarrel about this, right? You and I disagree a little bit about the exact definition of what constitutes government. We've plowed that ground. I don't think you have an issue with what I'm saying. You have an issue with how I call it government. Okay, I say, all right, let's call it government because it translates to other people just fine. So we disagree a little bit there. I don't argue about capitalism, socialism. I think you and I are on the same page there. I think we can chop that one off and say, if you want to be a socialist, have fun, just don't violate the principle. If you want to be a capitalist, have fun, don't violate the principle, don't be a crony capitalist or whatever. And so we're really focusing on the principle. We're leading with the principle, which I think is very, very important. And I know you don't love the aspirational values. And now, I was going to mention to you, it seems to me, David Friedman really likes some of these ideas very much so. And I think he realizes, like I realize, and maybe you disagree here, the principle doesn't resolve every question. There is some, and you're happy with what I would call injustices, right? The guy that steals the gun to kill somebody to save the world, you still want to punish that guy and put him in jail. And I understand that position. I've kind of harmonized the two positions by saying, yes, it's still a violation of the principle, and we're going to still convict you, but we're going to give the jury an option to take the big bad punishment of incarceration off the table and essentially turn it into a civil matter and let people raise money and bail the guy out and kind of resolve it that way, which is importing a little bit of a utilitarian / consequentialist notion in some of the rough edges of our principle. Because look, if the principle works 98% of the time, that's great. That 2%, even if we did the wrong thing 2% of the time, I'd still frankly be very, very happy with that. I'm just trying to resolve that 2% in a way that makes sense. I don't know, Walter, if you had certain things. I got a list of questions, things I wanted to discuss with you, but I don't want to hog up all our time if you have certain things you wanted to get into.
Well, I want to tell you a joke. The man was asked, "How is your wife?" And the answer was, "Compared to what?"
I've heard that one before. It's an economist joke, right?
Right. It's an economist joke. So, I sometimes call Milton Friedman a commie. And a friend of mine said, well, under whose rule would you rather live, Milton Friedman or Biden?
Yes.
Well, case closed. So yes. I'd be happy to live under 3L, even though I only agree on 99.8% of everything.
And I'd love to live under Matt Sands' rule because we only got to worry about the hard questions and everything else is good. Although I keep telling Matt, because I deal with this every day, people are going to say everything's gray, right? In fact, we don't have a standard definition across the country of murder, of fraud. We say force, fraud, and coercion. Each of these things is defined differently in different states, as it should be. But and there are other things as well that are not so clear. And so I have a hard time saying, well, okay, it's a gray area. But I'm getting ready to work on a chapter in my book that I think is the hardest of all questions. And I heard in David Friedman's book, he addressed this. He considers it the hardest of all questions. And I don't think he gave a satisfactory answer to this. So I wanted to get your thoughts. This whole idea of national defense, funding national defense. It's a very hard question. There's free rider issues. And so I don't know. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I as an anarcho-capitalist, I believe in private defense agencies - courts, and I think they'll do a better job than the government.
Of course, I agree with this, but I think David Friedman's point is the agencies that do not provide national defense are going to be less expensive. And so people will buy those ones and not worry about paying for national defense. And then, so how are we going to get it paid for? There'll be free riders and this and that. And, I deal with, and I can tell how I deal with it, but I wanted to get your thoughts, and then I would bounce some things off of you.
Well, look, I got to get off. It's getting late. I got to be up early. But what I'll do is I'll send you a reading list or bibliography on national defense.
Okay.
And I suggest you read the first paragraph of everything.
Okay.
And then delve into whatever makes sense in the first paragraph.
Okay. Can I ask you one other quick thing?
Sure.
I'm very concerned on the corona thing. I think there's an issue that's still on the table that's a hard issue to figure out, which is this virus replication issue, right? And maybe we shouldn't talk about it in terms of corona. We could talk about it in terms of virus X, because people have lots of different views on corona. But, generally, I like to say, look, if you want to take the vaccination, take the vaccination. If you don't want to take it, don't take it. The government shouldn't mandate anything. But what about this question of, for the people who don't take it, you are allowing normally we say, look, if you want to, you get the vaccine, that's your risk, you take it. But now, by not getting vaccinated, you've allowed the vaccine to replicate, which allows it to maybe come out with a new variant, which allows it to come out with a new dangerous variant, which my vaccine now doesn't protect me against. And you're the reason that this deadly virus now is replicating and now creating a substantial risk towards me. Do I have a right to tell you, hey, Walter, you got to get a vaccination?
Did I send you the article I wrote about this?
You did, but I don't think it covered that issue. I mean, maybe I missed it, or I remember what you wrote. This was your article about, hey, we shouldn't have a position as libertarians. And I completely agree with you on this point.
Right. It's a matter of fact. If the facts are such, then you should be able to force people to take a vaccination. If the facts are the other way, you shouldn't. And we quasi-libertarians don't know the facts because we're not epidemiologists, we're not doctors.
Right.
However, the burden of proof is on he who would coerce anyone or force anyone to do anything. So now you ask, well, have they met their burden of proof? And I say they've come nowhere near meeting their burden.
Corona, I agree with you. But what if I give you stipulated facts, Walter, and I say, look, let's imagine the virus is deadly. Let's imagine the virus is going to replicate, and it's going to come into a more deadly version that's not going to be that the vaccine won't protect you against. What troubles me here is your failure to get vaccinated allows the virus to replicate, but this isn't really something you're doing. This is something the virus is doing, and this virus is part of the universe. And so I'm not so sure that I agree with this argument.
Oh, no, I think that if the facts are such as you stipulate, and we've met the burden of proof that this is the fact that you're not getting a vaccination, you're a murderer.
But what if I say this? I'm not the one this is the virus that's doing it, not me. Why am I responsible for the virus replicating?
Because the facts are such that if you don't get a vaccination, you'll kill people.
So if you were convinced, and I don't know what the burden of proof is, if it's beyond a reasonable doubt or preponderance or what it is, but if you're convinced that, let's just say, for example, Delta could have been prevented had more people gotten vaccinated earlier, let's just say that that's true. If that's true, then you support mandatory forced vaccinations.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
I'm not so quick to go there. This is obviously, probably most, if not all, libertarians would be very uncomfortable with that position.
Well, I think they're wrong. I think if the facts are such that by your refusal to get a vaccination, you're killing people. And you can't blame it on the virus. The virus is, like a storm. Look, suppose this fact that if you don't get a vaccination, the earth ends. It just blows up. That's the fact. And we've proven this. Well, we force you to get the vaccination because you're a murderer.
Even though you're not the cause. Somebody else is going to destroy the earth unless you get vaccinated.
No, it's a natural thing. God is going to destroy the earth, or it's a natural thing. Somehow stipulate the earth blows up into smithereens unless you get a vaccination. We'll force you to have a vaccination because your inaction is is causally related to everyone dying.
Okay. All right. Well, there seems to be some pretty strong evidence that Corona has mutated into a Delta variant, which is more dangerous and is less, you're less protected against by the vaccination. Maybe there's an argument right now. I don't know.
No, there's no argument right now. It has to be based on the science. And then what these bastards are doing is they're threatening to take away the medical licenses of doctors who disagree. They say it's misinformation. In other words, if you're going to make a case, you have to have science. And what science means is open-ended discussion. And you can't tell doctors we're taking away your license. You can't tell epidemiologists if you disagree, you're guilty of misinformation and we're going to cancel you out.
But don't we get close to fraud here? What if the doctors are giving false information that people are relying on, and now as a result of relying on it, they're dying because they're not getting the, I mean, I don't know. I'm just throwing it. I'm not saying I agree with this. I'm just throwing it out there.
Now we're arguing in a circle, I think. I mean, we don't know what the truth is. The only way we're going to get to the truth is if people are allowed to say, to give misinformation. And they're not allowing people to give misinformation, so they're not basing it on the science. Therefore, they've not come anywhere near meeting their burden of proof. So I don't think they're justified in doing anything. But if we stipulate that the way you want to stipulate, then yes.
But doesn't it matter who you talk to? Because there are people today who would say, look, the overwhelming weight of scientific evidence says, let's just say, for example, concludes that the vaccination is both safe and effective and it stops the replication issue. And there are other people who say, no, that's not true. How do we ever get to the bottom? Who decides the facts?
The experts, the epidemiologists.
But at what point do we declare? Does it have to be 100%?
Well, we have to have courts for that. But look, take the case of Pluto. Is Pluto a planet or not? Right. I don't give a rat's ass whether it is or not, but the astronomers, it's important to them. So, and right now they're having a good debate. But suppose that the people who said Pluto is a planet were, canceling the other people.
Yeah.
And taking away their licenses to be astronomers or whatever it is. They're firing them with tenure. Well, then I would tend to believe the other side, because I would say, well, if they had truth on their side, they wouldn't have to engage in such underhanded methods. Well, the people, the pro-vaxxers are engaging in underhanded methods. So I tend to believe the anti-vaxxers.
Yeah, and of course, their response back would be, as a result of people denying that Pluto is a planet or not a planet, nobody's dying as a result of that. Their response is going to be, this misinformation is misleading people, and a lot of people are dying as a result.
Well, it's the same thing with global warming. The global warming people are saying that unless we shape up and don't use carbon, we're all going to die. And what they do is they engage in underhanded tactics in their arguments. So I tend to believe the other side, Because again, I'm not a meteorologist. I'm not a weatherman. I don't know that stuff. So I tend to go the other side on the grounds that if they had truth on their side, they wouldn't have to resort to this crap. I got to get off, but let me just say this thing about this. What do you call it? David Friedman's view about you'll only patronize the police forces that are local because it'll be cheaper. Well, then, and I'm, let's say I'm a international. I'm worried about the Chinese or the Russians. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say, look, Russians and Chinese, if you bomb Mark Victor and his what do you call it, clients, no skin off of my teeth. But if you mess around with Texas, where men are men and, you know, cows are scared and all that stuff, well, then we're going to kick your butt. So I think what you have is this thing called in economics, the internalization of externalities. But I got to get off, but I will send you some stuff. And I just suggest you read the first paragraph of everything or most things, and then we can talk about it again.
Sounds great, Walter. I appreciate you meeting me so late. Great talk. Even the short one was well worth it for me. Thanks,
Me
brother.
too.
Take care.
I enjoy it. Take care of yourself.
All right. Good night.
Bye.